Welcome to Elevate, the podcast where we dissect exceptional achievers who are consistently raising the bar personally and professionally to produce extraordinary results in investment real estate and ultimately in their lives. Now here's your host, Tyler Chesser.
Elevate Nation, welcome back. This is Tyler Chesser. I'm so thankful to have you here. And I want to welcome Elevate Nation back because I always ask this question. It's like ingrained in my identity now. Elevate Nation, are you ready to take it to another level? Because I know I am. And we are here today with Brian Bradley. And Brian, I want to welcome you to the show. Brian, how are you, sir?
I'm great, Tyler. Thanks for having me on and putting the podcast together. And I just hope that I can add some value here to you and your listeners, and especially to your Elevate Nation. And as they're elevating themselves, teach them kind of how to protect themselves and manage their risk and liability better.
Absolutely. And, we're going to dive into a lot of that. And I think our show will be wide ranging and very useful for Elevate Nation in many different capacities. But before we get there, I want to remind you that our mission is to identify and apply how the best of the best raise the bar personally and professionally to achieve greatness in real estate and beyond. And this is a masterclass for leaders and those who are looking to achieve uncommon results and purposeful outcomes through real estate investing and ultimately in their lives. And if you appreciate what we're doing, we would appreciate if you subscribe to the show, give us a rating and a review. It certainly goes a long way to share that message. I mean, we're ultimately looking to reach millions of people with this message because it's important. Most people are just tolerating their life. Most people are plugging it in. And, by the time, their minimum responsibilities are over with, they're out of there. And they're living a life that really is there's so much margin left towards living, their greatest capacity. And what we're talking about today, it's going to be a personal development journey. It's going to be a professional development journey. It's going to be tactics on real estate investment as well as legal protection and asset protection. But I want to introduce you to Brian. And so Brian is a leading educator and asset protection attorney for higher risk business professionals, entrepreneurs, real estate investors, and high net worth families. Brian's firm focuses on adding value for clients and educating them on what they don't realize they don't know. What Brian does for clients is act as an advisor and focuses on setting up systems and strategic teams to protect your assets and preserve your wealth, which is a great topic for Elevate Nation because we continue to elevate, but we've got to make sure that we've got the proper protections in place, which is a lot of what we'll talk about today. And the goal of, Brian's goal is lifestyle preservation, peace of mind, changing the way that predators view you. And there are a lot of predators out there. And Brian also acts as an in-house counsel and a chief knowledge officer. I love that. For firms helping to maximize their value of existing and new products, along with technology integration. Brian was selected to the Lawyers of Distinction list in 2019, Super Lawyers Rising Star list in 2015, nominated to America's Top 100 High Stakes Litigators list, and nominated to the 2017 Law Firm 500 Award. So Brian, we all love our bios, and you certainly have a very impressive bio here. Tell us a little bit more about Brian Bradley behind the bio.
Yeah, so the bio is kind of embarrassing. And I think, the Brian behind the bio is just a life of pivoting. I came out of law school what are we going to call it? The Great Recession, Second Great Depression came out. And so there was a time where I literally had to work for free for 3 years just to learn how to practice law. And so it's just been a matter of pivoting, how to grow practice, how to get knowledge, how to make contacts, and then truly staying hold of, what's your why, what's your driving force behind you.
Interesting. So I love the thought of life of pivoting because, one of the books I read years ago was, Who Moved My Cheese? One of the most simple books you could ever imagine. And if you think about it, it's such it's a profound concept. Because really everyone's life is a life of pivoting,
Oh, it really is.
I mean, so you've got to be ready to adapt, and in any real estate market and anything in your life, professionally, personally, you got to be ready to change. Change is the only constant. So tell me more about that. I mean, what do you mean about a life of pivoting, and where did that begin?
I think it just began. I always had an entrepreneurial spirit and drive. I'm very atypical personality. I'm very driven, very athletic. So I was good in sports growing up. Always was, in front doing the presentations. And the entrepreneurial thing was I came from the mountains, Lake Tahoe. So we would go shovel snow off of people's roofs and decks to go get $50 to go save up to buy a new snowboard or, new boots or ski gear, raking leaves and stuff like that, cutting grass, when kids are actually still doing that stuff to make money because your parents are like, no, go raise the money yourself. We'll help you. But I had to find creative ways to go and get a new snowboard or go and get a new ski book, snowboard and all of that stuff. So I just kept developing as I got older. And then I got injured in college playing baseball, and tore up my shoulder and realized I have to actually figure out what I'm going to do with my life now. And so when I got completely derailed from, athletics and realizing I'm not going to be a professional baseball player anymore, I was really insecure on my knowledge side of life. And so I just transitioned all of that competitive nature into being a scholar and just diving into every book that I possibly can so that no one can ever say, well, you're just a dumb jock. Why do we care what you have to say? And then I always liked business. I always liked money. I always liked financing. And I never really understood what all the pieces of the pie were adding up to in my life because I never read Rich Dad, Poor Dad at that time. And I was really just trying to build a life out of a rat race. And so I was really self-reliant. And when I went to law school, I was originally, supposed to be hired as the next district attorney, in the county that I was at. But then the economy tanked right when I graduated law school. So my job offer got rescinded. And then I had to figure out what to do, once I passed the bar exam. So then that trickled down into civil law. All the law firms in the nation were cutting their staffing by half. They realized they had outdated principles of how they're running and operating. The whole industry was just upside down. There were no jobs. They couldn't pay legal bills. They couldn't keep the lights on. They couldn't pay for Westlaw. And being, the first one into a law firm, I realized, well, even though I'm only one settling cases, I was the first one cut and laid off. And one of the owners of the firm pulled me up and was like, hey, you have a magic gift. Don't be afraid to jump in the deep end and go it on your own. And I realized, I survived those first 3 or 4 years of practicing when none of my other friends did because I was self-reliant and I just chose to jump. And I worked for free, literally for 3 years, as long as other organizations covered the legal cost.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that's so interesting is that it always requires that leap of faith, right? It's like you got to go through the belly of the beast, so to speak, to be able to get to the other side. And, you also spoke a lot of a lot of different things, sort of, coming up and, your experience with having to pivot who your identity was, as an athlete. And you said, well, wait a minute now, because of that, it caused me to, become more inclined to grow as a professional and become a professional. So was it like a culmination of all those different events, and as well as coming out, as an attorney, sort of one of the worst economic times in history? Was it all of those events in a culmination that caused you to say, look, I've got to do everything I can to become, great and, to seek excellence? Or was it a personality trait, or what was it that caused you to say, look, I'm drawing this line in the sand and I'm seeking something uncommon. I'm not going to live this ordinary life. How did that occur for you?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of all of that. One, I'm self-driven, and I've always been self-taught. And so I've never been afraid to fail. I just look at failure differently. I'm not, ooh, woe is me, I failed. I look at failure as a lesson, learn from it, modify, adapt, overcome, kind of military principle. Don't make the same mistake twice. And so I think failure breeds success. And so the more you fail, the more you're going to learn. And then, the faster you're going to succeed. And then I would jump into knowledge, and I never really cared about people's success stories as much as I'd like to learn about their failures. And so I would copy and mimic successes and then tweak them. But then I more cared about reading and learning about why people failed. So I would have a higher, faster learning rate and just not do those same mistakes. And so when you combine that with my, natural drive and then my reliance to not be afraid of failure, I think the line got drawn in the sand with me when I realized no one's going to give me a freebie. The economy is out of my control. A lot of businesses, I don't own the business, so I'm always going to be able to be expendable or replaceable. If you're too good, you're going to be replaced by someone who can do it cheaper and at the same rate. If you don't own it, you have no control. And I learned that, through the economy of bouncing around during that time of firm to firm to firm who can just pay my bills and then say, hey, well, my son's married to that lawyer is my best friend's this, and you're the new guy on the totem pole. We love you, but sorry, there's nothing that we can, do for you. And that was kind of my line in the sand when I finally drew it and said, I am getting out of this rat race. I'm creating my own identity and my own business, just jump in and do it. And then I had to learn how to do that. And then that was the next 4 or 5 year growing span of, all right, how do I practice law? How do I create a business? And it wasn't until I kind of got into passive cash flow principles and rich dad, poor dad and all of that, and realizing law firms fail because, or solo practitioners fail in any business because they can't step away from pounding every nail. They wear every single hat, and you're going to drown yourself. And so I had to step away and say, how do I create a business? I can't just be client based, because if a client doesn't come in, I fail. Or if the client doesn't pay my bill, I still can't pay my bills. So how do I create a system and a business? And as soon as I started doing that, I actually realized I have more free time. I can be more efficient, and I'm just doing what most business owners that are successful do: manage my business.
So I want to come back to failure here soon and, talk about that. But tell me more, because we're coming in, there's a lot there. We're coming in on, creating a business rather than, just a base of clients. And I totally get that. I mean, when I got started in the real estate business, it was like Solopreneur Life. And, it's not recommended for sure, because you get on this hamster wheel and it's almost worse than the rat race of working for someone else, so you've got to be careful there. And I love you keep going back to the rich dad, poor dad thing. And, it's a very simple concept, but just switching where you are in that, in the cash flow quadrant it's a process. So tell me about, I want to fast forward kind of today, what are you doing currently to, cultivate and improve your own business system? And what are you doing, otherwise to continue to raise the bar in your own practice?
Yeah. So what I'm doing is I switched from having a lot of overhead to decreasing my overhead. I think a lot of businesses have to have this perception of, I have this big office, I have all these associate attorneys that I have to be committed to on an hourly basis, and then they get in a lot of debt. And I just took it into a more functional, modern day way of running a business, to where I do everything national. My clients, if I'm going to go into court on my own, I'm only going to go into court on states I'm, licensed in. But asset protection, I do nationwide. So I don't need to have this big, massive office, and I can save money on, overhead by not having to pay annual salaries. And so I outsource a lot of legal work to independent contractors, and then I incentivize them based off of commission splits, how I can ethically, or, if they're licensed or not. To where, okay, you're going to get a base salary off of the client that comes in, but then depending on how we go, now we're going to create an incentive of a percentage off of that, depending, on how the settlements come out or where we go. And so I was able to create a business structure around drive and incentive for other entrepreneurial, spirited lawyers, and other business affiliates that I work with. So I created a network of the top asset protection firms as the production side, who've been around for 113 years, because they do the best of the best work, and then combine that with my litigation expertise, and it turned into a really good business nucleus.
I love our economy now because it allows you to be so nimble in, your structure of the business. It doesn't have to be this big bloated organization to do great work, to provide a great service or create a great product. So it's such a great reminder. It's like, who cares what, the perception is of your staff and all these different things? You can still provide a great service and be nimble. And also, the economy is also shifting more and more to 1099 sort of work,
Yeah. No, it really is. And there's just the luxury of technology. And then if you utilize technology, you're going to be more efficient. You're going to have happier work colleagues. If you're happier and more efficient, who cares where it's getting done at the end of the day? I just want high quality work. I want stuff done. And, what is it? Over promise, what is it? Over promise, over deliver. Under promise, deliver quicker, and under budget, is all I care about.
Absolutely. Well, so I want to honor Elevate Nation, and, because really the fact is, if you're going to continue to elevate your life, you're going to continue to elevate your business, your portfolio, you've got to be thinking about, well, all right, you've got a target on your back now in some ways. So talk to us just kind of a very high level, and we can certainly drill into any of the details necessary that, Elevate Nation can continue to follow up on. Perhaps it can even build a longer term relationship with you. But tell us about, what are some of the things that you're seeing in terms of asset protection that many investors are really deficient in?
Like, where are they getting?
Like where are you seeing most of the holes legally for real estate investors that they're getting themselves into a risky position?
Yeah, I think that just one, they're not managing their risk and liability at all. Like, oh, I'll set that up later on. I'll set it up when I need it. There's no proactive thought. There's no preventative thought. They think that it goes to kind of cost. Cost is always going to be an upside of procrastination. The longer you wait, the more it's going to cost. So if you do things beforehand, before you need them, before you're under fire, before you're being sued, it's going to be a lot less than in the long run. Or I see a lot of problems of people undervaluing the actual services of experts, and because they're used to doing everything themselves, so they become Google experts, but they don't know how to cross the T's and dot the I's, what clauses have to go in, how it all actually works together, and they piece this all together on their own. And the next thing you know, they're sued, and it doesn't hold up in court, and it's an expensive learning lesson. So I think that they're trying to, especially in real estate, they're used to DIYing or flipping a property or doing all of this with the agents. But then they don't come in and protect themselves from the liability and risk on the, right away.
Yeah, I mean, one of my biggest pet peeves about real estate in general is that it's so reactive. I mean, everything is.
It's the heaviest litigated area of law that there is. And so it's like, if you're going to be a real estate investor, or you're going to, start investing or creating even businesses, there's just so many ways for you to be sued in that you have to be proactive and ahead of it. Because if you think you're going to come back in on the backside, it's going to cost you, it's like, why spend 75 cents on a dollar if you could have protected yourself for 5 cents on the dollar?
Mm-hmm. So most of Elevate Nation is, they're either doing very big things, or they're growing to a point where that's in their near future. So,
yeah.
So give us a couple of just quick tips on what they need to do to protect their portfolio in a proactive nature.
Yeah. So I would say the first thing you want to do is mimic what the rich do. Don't own things in your own personal name. So depending on wherever you're at in the totem pole, if you're just starting out, or if you're, $100 million, there's going to be different levels of protection that you can do. So when you're looking through what you want to set up, you kind of want to look it through the eyes of effectiveness, control, cost, and maintenance. Those are kind of the main things that people are going to make decisions based off of. So effectiveness meaning, is this going to actually work as I intend it to, or am I inviting someone to try to pierce it to get a payday? Control isn't in the sense of control as people have this outdated mindset of, I have control of my car because it's titled in my name. It's, my house is in my name. That's not the kind of control that you want. That's called liability. So what you want to do is separate beneficial use and enjoyment. I can live in my house, but it's in my trust, but an asset protection trust, not a revocable living trust. I have a yacht, I have a boat, but it's not in my personal name. It's in an LLC or my trust. So you want to remove the liability for you personally and create as many separations as you can, but still be able to use and enjoy them and pass them down. And it all has to come with reasonable costs. If you're just starting out, you're not going to be able to afford an offshore Cook Island asset protection trust. There's no need for you to have that. So maybe you should start out with the basic LLC until you outgrow it. And then you just stage up as you go along, and then realize there is going to be a point when you outgrow that basic setup. And maintenance fees, people have to add that in the equation. Like, you can't be spending a lot of money every year on something that you're not going to get a return on an investment out of because you spent it all on the maintenance, or your CPA can't figure out how to file the IRS, documents because it got too convoluted. And so those are the main things I think that they should be looking at. And then you just stage it up. Maybe we start with an LLC. California, there's specific things we do in California with exemptions called private retirement plan exemptions, which are amazing. And then you move into asset protection trusts in either domestic or foreign.
So, yeah, I think the big takeaway from this is you need to be aware. Obviously, as an investor, you're a quarterback of your team. And so you've got to be able to build expertise in these different categories. Legal, of course, is one of the most important categories in terms of being proactive, is really the theme of what we're talking about here. Is, it's expecting the unexpected. It's expecting the worst to occur. Hope is not a strategy. You don't hope that you don't get sued or, think bad things don't happen. You go ahead and take measures to expect that will happen. And when it happens, it doesn't bother you. And, not only have you developed yourself to a point where, it doesn't rattle you internally, but it also doesn't rattle you financially and practically as well.
Well, and that's a big part of it. And then, it's kind of like you said in the intro of educating clients on what they don't know that they don't know. I think people can say, like, I don't know this, so I know how to go ask that question and get the answer. But if you don't know what you don't know, that's where most massive losses come from, because you didn't even know that you didn't know that. And now you just had a really expensive learning experience. And so that's what we try to educate clients on and shrink that aspect of the pie. And unfortunately, most people own most of their assets in that category of I didn't know what I didn't know. And then they're paying a lot of money on the back end. So that's where the education part of with the clients come in and shrinking that aspect of the pie down. And then as you start growing, you actually can start getting return of investments from the asset protection systems, because you're working with amazing trust administrators who, basically are auditing your CPA to find missing dollars, like missing tax benefits and credits, which can equate to like $50, $80, $100,000 a year. And so when you do cost analysis of it, yeah, you might spend $17,000, $30,000 initially on a setup cost and then $5,000 annually. But then if you're recouping all these missing dollars, it already paid for itself 50 times over from the initial startup cost. And then this is an annual thing. So it's organically living with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, what we're talking about is investments, and, investing in your asset protection is another part of that investment, another component. And so I love that. And so, Brian, I want to transition back to you as, as a person who's seeking greatness, who's seeking excellence, continually. You talked earlier about failure. Tell me about a specific failure that at the time, like, maybe had you rattled, but then it turned out to be the seed of a greater opportunity in the future for you.
Yeah. Like my failures, I don't think so much like I was saying as failures, as it was just, really a difficulty getting started and going along. So I always had to keep pivoting myself. And my biggest issue, I think, is I have a hard time saying no. So I always feel, okay, I can do this and I can do it better than most other people. And it almost gets to the point to where if I really, want you to work with me and I'm like, you really don't understand, you need this. I used to almost devalue myself to like, I'll do it for free just to prove a point to you. And so it was really hard for me to break away from that mindset and just learn how to say no.
Like, so it was like those first 3 years then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got taken advantage of a lot going through just in the economic times, and I learned a lot. It was great. But I also had to learn how to say no. And then maybe the client themselves, they're vetting me, but I'm vetting you. You may not be a good fit for the profile of my firm. And it may cause more strife to have you as a client than I really should have. And sometimes I just got to say, sorry, the fit's not right.
So tell me about saying no. What are you getting better at that? And if so, how? And what's an example of something that you've had to say no to recently?
Yeah, just recently I'm getting better. I'm getting better at it. When I was spending a lot of time in court, I had a horrible time of saying no. But I think it's because I just got so used to, for 3 years, working for free, and being able to go up against the big dogs as a new attorney back then and win. I was like, no, I'll just, I like the underdogs. Like, I will go and fight for you. I was used to it. And then it transitioned into my business, my practice now, and I wasn't able to transition that mindset. But sometimes when we do an asset analysis or diagnostic, the numbers don't always add up to where it benefits, us in the sense of like the clients won't fully qualify. And I don't see the cost value for them in what we're doing. And it's like, hey, I'd love to help you, but there's no cost value that I see in this for both of us or even for you. Not enough of your assets would qualify into this exemption specific plan that we want to use, but they so, exceptionally wanted it. I was like, I had to get better at just saying, no, sorry, for your own good, I'm not going to devalue something that we're creating for you to then have it not work. And so I just got really strong and good at saying, no, sorry, walk away. We used to have them sign waiver liabilities and all of this and to say, fine, here, take it. But I just didn't want to carry that kind of overhead, and I had to get strong at just saying, sorry, no, I appreciate your business, but it doesn't fit for us.
Yeah. And I mean, I think most people, when you say no, most respectable people respect that in return as well, because it's like, you can't possibly just let things go by the wayside, especially when you're a professional like yourself. And it's like, look, this is not in your best interest, but
Yeah.
I'm literally not saying yes to this. So if
You
that's
you
the
would
case, you need to
think
work with somebody
you
else.
would think I had one guy like 2 weeks ago, a financial advisor with a big portfolio of clients, and like, I'm sorry, it just is not a good fit. And he wrote me a horrible email, like, how dare you say no to me? Like, I'll never bring my clients to you. And I'm like,
Great.
it's fine. There's a million
Yeah.
other firms, like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but it's just not a good fit for us. And
Yeah.
it's also, how do you work with the other person? Like, you may just be more of a headache with both of us and our personalities that's just going to cause a massive problem.
Yeah. And I think saying no is like an investment in the long term. It's like, well, yeah, maybe I missed out on this opportunity today, but now I know that I freed up my time,
Yeah.
my energy towards people that are doing the right thing. They're taking my counsel or whatever it is. And so I think that's a good reminder as well. It's like, this is a long game, man. Life is a long game, but especially real estate investment. And so you've got to be able to say no in whatever capacity you're in. So I appreciate you sharing that. Tell me about, who do you model your life after? Who do you model your business after?
Yeah.
Because I like, we don't have to recreate the wheel, but of course we like to innovate. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, so it's a good question. I probably going to have an answer that you probably don't really. You're like, oh, I didn't think about it that way. But I don't really don't have role models per se, because people are human and humans are fallible. And so like, if you put all of these people up, individuals on pedestals, the likelihood of just being let down completely is really high. Like Tiger Woods or all of this. You're just gonna be like, oh my God, I tried to model this person, and now I got completely let down. But I read a lot. And so I think my role models are just the lessons I learned through books,
Mm-hmm.
because I've always had to be self-taught, and I also came out during, a massive recession where I didn't have the luxury of professional role models to walk me along. I just had to, jump in the deep end of this pool and find out if I swim or sink.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was how my life just panned out. And so, like I said, like, no one taught me how to be a good lawyer or a trial lawyer, so I didn't have that luxury. Um, and so I looked to the best people of whatever I wanted to do in the nation, and then I would either call them, write them an email, and be like, I just want to talk to you. I'll pay for your coffee. Like, I just need a little bit of advice. Or if I couldn't get a hold of them, I would just go buy all their books, or practice books or finance books, and I would just read them all. And then, like Rick Friedman, Gary Spence, David Ball, like for trial lawyers,
Mm-hmm.
and I would just mimic what were they so successful at, and then put that into my practice. And then what were their failures at, learn from that. And then I would just be proactive. And then I applied the same principles in adding the asset protection part of my firm. By when I started adding the asset protection element, I reached out to the top 4 asset protection firms in the nation, guys that go teach everybody asset protection. I just wrote to them and called them and said, hey, like, this is my value. I would love to work with you. I don't want to have any errors for clients. Let's find an economical way for us all to work together. And then I just started building it up that way.
I love the concept that you just discussed about being self-taught, because there's so many people out there today that, in my opinion, are not getting what they need through our education system.
Yeah.
And if you just allow the bare minimum of, definitely a high school degree or even a bachelor's degree or even a more advanced degree, you're really still not getting what you need to really succeed in the real world. And so
Yeah.
you've got to go acquire that information through books. I mean, there's an unlimited amount of information out there. You have to find the appropriate information. You got to find the appropriate experts who are really doing this in the real world that you can apply this information in your own life. So it's like, you had a blessing of all these different things that can converge into giving you the opportunity to be self-taught, because others who are, formally educated in many ways perhaps don't have this opportunity. So I see it as a blessing.
No, and I wouldn't change it how things played out for me at all.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that part of it, with the whole self-taught thing is just a lot of people aren't good at, they make a lot of excuses, like, I don't have the time to read. I don't have the time. Like, that's a bunch of, that's a bunch of BS.
You gotta make the time.
Make the time, but even be more efficient with your time. I listen to audiobooks, in my car. I work out, like mind, body, soul. It's all, it all has to be worked on. While I'm at the gym, I'm responding to emails if I have to. I'm listening to an audiobook or a podcast. I'm learning something. I'm applying it. And then at night, I take time to read, something, to actually read and open a book. So I'm, just because I like to actually have the books. Right.
Same here. I'm old school with books too.
Yeah.
I love the.
I just got into the audio books and listening to podcasts because I'm like, I just need to be more efficient with my time. And I found that's the best time to do it. Driving in a car, I'm not listening to music that much. I'm learning something.
Yeah. And one thing that keeps coming back to me is, how bad do you want it? So, yes, of course, all of us are pressed on time. I know that is for sure with me, and I know it is for you, Brian. And you've got to figure out, where is my time? Where's my low hanging fruit? Work from there. But also you've got to cultivate habits, because if you can't cultivate your appropriate habits, then it's going to be an uphill battle in creating, that time where you can develop your own skills, develop your own knowledge, your own understanding. So I'm curious to know, what are some habits that you've installed within your own life? You talked about a few things there, obviously reading, working out, but what else? I mean, give us a look behind the curtain there.
Yeah, like, I'm very much a creature of habit, but I also am very adaptable. And so, like, I'll wake up, I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, so they're waking me up by like 6 o'clock. So, help get the girls, started. And then I'm always reading or listening to something, I'll put on, read them a book, I'll be reading like a law book or, investment book.
Awesome.
My 3-year-old has a huge vocabulary. I'm like, where did they get that
vocabulary
so cool.
from?
And I'm like, the way that our household is.
Mm-hmm.
And so my habits are just always based on education and learning. And then I always think there's a learning experience like every second of your day. Like, if you just walk around, I just observe things, I think, differently than most people. Mm-hmm. And so I'll look at, that just happened. Like, what's my brain will automatically go, why? And then what did I pick up from that? And then I'll watch a movie and I'm like, I look at the underlining of what's the point of the story of the movie versus just like, okay, I watched a Hollywood flick and now I'm, there's a reason I'm watching it. What's the point of this? The author is trying to tell me.
If you reframe your life from a curious perspective, there's always something to learn. And once you just really embrace that curiosity, it becomes so much fun because there's always something to learn.
It really is. And that's true. And I think if you just start taking out the excuses, and then, like what I was going to say is, if people identify, like you're saying, the driving force, the why, not like the why of your business, that's fine. Like, you can go and watch, I forget who the guy is that talks about that,
Simon Sinek.
Yeah. It's a great, point. I love it. I applied it in my own business.
Same.
But if you identify that in your own personal life, you're going to light a fire under your butt, and whether it's like, for me, it's my kids, my daughters, like, I don't want to be on a wheel running around and not, like, I'm dance dad, soccer dad, and gymnastics dad because I created a system that frees up a lot of my time to be it. Mm-hmm. And then, my wife works nights at a hospital. So if I can then systemize this to where she doesn't have to be, working nights at the hospital, 12-hour mm-hmm. night shifts, that's, my driving force,
It's all about your outcomes, and I think it's such an amazing thing too. That's like, I feel like it's a little bit unique in sort of this time period in the world. It's like, I recently read the biography of Leonardo da Vinci, and it was talking about the Renaissance era, back in the 14 and 1500s. And I feel like we're in a Renaissance era again today. Yeah. And we have the opportunity of sharing this information, these tactics, these habits with our children or with, other people who we influence. And I think it's such an amazing thing, but also like when you share it, like you're sharing with your children, your young children, you're reading legal books that, you see it as the outcome towards creating, what you want in your life. And they're, soaking it up too, because they're like, man, dad loves this,
Yeah.
I think it's an
Totally.
amazing thing.
No, it
So
is. And my buddy had a great point. We talk, get like a little week together, powwow with cigars in the fire pit, and we talk about books and stuff that we're doing. And it goes to the adage, like you talk to 10 people, it's like the 1% rule,
mhm,
80%, it's like, whatever, great.
yeah.
2% will hear what you're saying. And then there's only 1% will actually apply it. So if you're going to learn something, read something, don't just read it and say, okay, I accumulated that knowledge. You got to apply what you learn.
100%. That is what I say all the time. People ask me all the time, how do you remember all the stuff you read? Because I'm like you, I love books. I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with reading, but I just apply immediately. And
Mhm.
then it just anchors into my nervous system, my
Yeah.
subconscious. I don't know. It just stays
And
there.
they're like, oh, you must have like a photographic memory. I'm like, no, I
No.
really don't. It's just, I apply, I learn by action and doing. I
Yep.
just read and I apply and I do. And then it's just muscle memory, and the brain's a muscle.
Yes. And as you read, your muscle gets stronger. It's not
Yeah.
just acquiring that information, but it's a workout for the mind, which is the most important
Hmm.
component of your entire physiology. So
Yeah.
yeah, at least that's my opinion. But tell me about an investment that you've made either in yourself or in your business that has been something extremely worthwhile over the past year or so.
Um, yeah. So I've been, a CRM, for my
Hmm.
business. I like utilizing, technology, and I
Yeah.
was still old school of like notes and this and like
Yeah.
post-its, and it got to where I'm like, I just have to, take the bite of the bullet here and jump into the cost and get a CRM to function,
Hmm.
my life a little bit better. And it was a good investment, and it was, really good business and personalized.
Yeah, I've heard this question a lot. It's like, well, which CRM do you use? And I'm like you, I invested in a CRM, and I've also heard that it's like the best CRM is the one that you're going to use,
Yeah.
because if you invest in it, you've got to continue to keep that, up to date, and keep growing it and these different things. So it's like you've got to stay on it, which is
Yeah.
same of everything. If you're going to invest in anything, it's about your behavior, not just the monetary value. Unless you're a passive investor in a syndication, perhaps, you still need to be an asset manager of those funds, in my opinion. So you've always got to be active, and no matter what you do, no matter what type of investment it is, whether it's for your personal development, your business, your financial, capacity, it's all about being active, and your behavior shift as well. So tell me about goals. I want to talk about some goals that you have been proud of accomplishing. Maybe what's one goal that you've been proud of accomplishing over the past year?
Yeah, over the last year, I really worked hard on going from, not, so there's a difference if you're familiar with like the cash flow quadrant of,
Yep.
being an employee to being self-employed and transitioning to a business owner and an
Hmm.
investor. I originally was just running everything as a self-employed, a solo business owner. And it took me a year or two to transition it to actually owning a business, which means I can walk away from it and it still exists and I can make money off of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's passive versus, I was only contingent upon surviving off of each client that was coming in.
Hmm.
And why do most law firms or businesses fail is because you can't run everything on your own. So even if you can and you get past that 7-year mark on your own, you're going to be so mentally fatigued and tired and drowning that you're just going to collapse and be done. And I took the hard step for the last 2 years of really just systemizing my entire practice, and then making really good affiliations with firms, and legal production teams, and then financial investors to like really make this a fine-tuned machine. And now it's all just come together, and I've had friends and other clients that are like, man, like, we're calling you and you're at the park with your kid, and everything's getting done. Like, how did you do this? This is amazing. And it was really just, I jumped into the pool of the principles and applied of the rich dad, poor dad, cash flow mindset of how to systemize a business. Because if it's not systemized, there's nothing passive about it. It's just a continuation of the wheel. So that's my biggest accomplishment, I think, on a business side,
Hmm.
of things, is just systemizing my practice.
I think another distinction, just for all of us to remind ourselves, is that whatever place of the cash flow quadrant that you find yourself right now. Let's just say either you're in the employee side or the self-employed side, or you're in the business quadrant. It is a process to get to the next phase of that. It
It
doesn't
is.
happen overnight. So don't kick yourself if look, man, you're self-employed. Oh my gosh, I know, I get it. Like, I've been there too.
Yep.
And it's a process. You've got to build these systems, your processes, your procedures. You've got to build out, well, what's our checklist look like for this? And who can I leverage? What resources can we bring in? What people need an opportunity or would like to have the opportunity of complying with the system?
And I would just to say, expect to fail and then learn from it and then modify, because, I didn't just automatically pop up like, oh my God, this is how I systemize my law practice. It took a long time. And then a lot of bad partnerships that failed for different reasons of why, to work out the kinks in the system. And so it was really, a multi-year learning process. But Robert Kiyosaki's was like a long process too, and everybody else's, and people were even telling him like, what's going on, and my parents were even like, what is going on, like, why are you doing this? And then when it turned the corner, everyone realized, oh wow, it worked, we see it.
Yeah. And it's like everybody says, it's like, man, you're an overnight success, but it's like, you didn't see the nights, the weekends, the hard, long period of time that it took to really, like you said, expect that failure, modify, and then apply again, fail again, keep failing until you succeed. And so
military principles, amplify, modify, adapt, and overcome. Like, great principle for life.
Love it. Love it. So it's an uncomfortable process, right? Tell me, what are you inspired and uncomfortably working towards now as a goal?
I don't really, honestly, I don't really think I have something that I'm uncomfortably working on, right now. Like I like working on problems, and I don't see things as problems. I just see business as, life goals, and, business as business. So it's kind of I'm trying to figure out how to answer that question, because I don't.
Well, it seems like you've just reached such a level of comfort with being uncomfortable that it's not uncomfortable to you anymore.
I just don't see problems like people do as like drowning in them. Something will come my way, and it's like, okay, assess and move on from there. Like there's going to be a solution. I may not have the solution right now, but the great thing, like one of my buddies told me, is like, we come to you and they help me modify my business structure, because everybody who's the best of the best at what they do to, solve a problem. And that's why we come to you. So he helped me restructure my business on the concept of it, of what I am, like you're the point guard, and that's what people should be coming to you for. And that's how I apply everything that is a problem in my life or business. Is there's a solution. If I don't know the answer, who do I talk to? Like I'm going to come up with an answer to something, or if I just have to cut ties with it, I cut ties with it, And so that's just the way I look at life.
There's a solution for everything. It's just a matter of how committed you are. I ask people all the time, are you interested or are you committed? Because if you're interested, then when the problem comes up, you're knocked off your course, you just give up. Or are you committed, you get knocked off course and you say, I was expecting to get knocked off course. I'm ready for this.
Yeah. And my parents, when I was, like really diving into restructuring this business, are like, why don't you just go back and work for a firm, or go back to the DA's office and be a prosecutor? And I'm like, because I'm not committed then to my practice, and I can't have a practice on the side and a business on the side. And then, I'm then A-ing it to the people who are paying me to go and represent them there, or to the state that I would be prosecuting, criminals for. So I'm like, I have to be committed to what I want and my goal.
I love it, man. Well, you embody Elevate Nation, that's for sure. So what we want to do now is we want to transition into our rapid fire section. What we call is this the rare air questionnaire. And the reason why we call it that is because you're theoretically climbing the mountain and you're reaching the peak. And most people gave up way before we reached the clouds, way before it really got tough. But we've continued through that discomfort, through the challenges, through the forks in the path. And so, we talked a lot about books, and I see the bookshelf behind you. If you're not watching on YouTube, you should definitely check it out on YouTube, because he's got a beautiful bookshelf here, which is always an exciting sight, in my opinion. And I think most of Elevate Nation would agree. So I'm just curious to know, we've talked about a few books, but what's the most impactful book that you've ever read, and why?
That's a really hard question, because it's like kid in a candy shop. But
you can give me a couple. Most people break the rule and give me a couple at least.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say the one that I always give people if I, when I first meet them or as guests, The Alchemist.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand with the other books we've been talking about, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and The Richest Man of Babylon, and things like that, because it's on the internal journey level about what those guys are talking about professionally. So it's about following your heart and this desire, no matter how crazy it can sound.
Yeah.
And then also just learning to listen to your heart and the language of the world. And learning just at the end of the day, like we've been talking about, how to pivot. Like life's going to be full of problems and heartaches and shortcomings. How do you move on from that?
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is so much in alignment with what we talk about, because, some people say, why can't we just talk about the tactics here, guys? Like, we just want to know, how do we protect our assets and how do we, maximize our cash on cash? At the end of the day, business is a spiritual game. And if you can't handle your own internal turmoil, if you can't learn that this journey is like, you've got to be able to, make the appropriate decisions and continue to ascend upon that path, then you're really not going to get where you want to go. And so I love the thought of, The Alchemist as being something that that you recommend, because it's about following your sort of your inner purpose, your inner desires, your greatest capacities. And so
Yeah, it's a kid that dropped everything that he knew, being a shepherd, and then started following this crazy dream.
Exactly. So you got to have some faith, right?
You got to jump into the deep end, sink or swim. You'll be amazed how fast of a swimmer you'll be if you let yourself just swim.
Absolutely. I love that. So what's the biggest way that you elevate your life on a daily basis?
Just through reading a lot and reflection. I'm one of those that, being an A-type personality, it's a big fight of wanting to, an alpha male type of personality. Like I want to go and conquer like right now.
Yeah.
So I had to learn to sit back and channel that energy into reflection and thought. So sometimes people will sit there, especially when I was like taking the bar exam, and the lady next to me was like, I didn't even know when you were going to start typing. And I was reading everything and I was just formulating the answer in my head. And the next thing you know, it was like, and I was done in, the typing part in 20 minutes. And I finished each section of the bar exam. Like I've had like 4 licenses. Like I did it each time, it was like 3 hours each section. I finished each one in like an hour, and I obviously passed. And they're like, what was going on? I'm like, I was just reflecting. And so I think that's part of what I do is I read, I think, I analyze, I spend a lot of time reflecting on my day, my thought process, where I might've gone wrong in it, and then tweaking it, and then exercising.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't have reflection built into their life or obviously their business, just because there's a constant flow of information. As we were talking about earlier, you can acquire any piece of information you want. Most of it's free. But if you don't take time to really kind of read in between the lines, so to speak, and say, well, what's missing from this information? What's missing from this book? Or, whatever it is, to be able to reflect on, well, how does this actually impact me? And how is this something that I can act on, or should I be acting on it at all? Should I be acquiring this information? And so it's a great reminder to just kind of step back and really, have some contemplative thought. So
and it's a hard lesson to learn. Like even times, especially if you're A-type personality, it's going to be it's really hard for me still. And I try to actively practice it.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like something that you're uncomfortably continue to work towards. So I love that. So how do you elevate others around you?
I just like to share as much as I can about what I read and knowledge. Like you're not going to, bench press your way through all of life's problems. So the only thing you really have is your brain power. And so as I read, I know most people aren't going to consume as much as I have. And so I just like to share and pass down as much as I can. This is the only thing I can really give of true value, I think, of people. I'm not into monetary gifts. A lot of other people are. I think I just like to share. I learned this, I read this, like this is how I'm applying it. And then it starts I love philosophy, like as a philosophy student, and it always starts great conversations, and people are always feeling uplifted after I talk to them, because like, I didn't think about it from that perspective, or I got to go get that book now. And so that's what I try to do to elevate other people, like on a personal level, is just share what I've read, or, tidbits that I find that they might need to, know about, without saying like, hey, you need to know this. I'll just throw it into a conversation nonchalantly.
Well, there's no greater gift than providing, information and knowledge and wisdom to other people that they can act upon, and they can create, within their own life, and they can go around the challenges that we've all run into, but what, you can learn so much from someone else. So I appreciate that about you very much. And Brian, this has been awesome, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show. If Elevate Nation wants to stay in contact with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn all the time. That's a great place, Brian T. Bradley. My website, www.btblegal.com, and I got tons of educational information on there. And I have a link to a free diagnostic that people fill out. Takes about 5 minutes. And I used to charge to go over the diagnostic with them, but I just would rather people fill out the diagnostic, figure out what we can possibly do for them, pick up the phone, we'll call you, set up an appointment, and then just go over the initial review for free, just so you have an idea of what you need and what can and can't be done. Whether people decide to retain us or not, that's another thing. Like, go take the diagnostic and go somewhere else. Maybe, they'll do something cheaper. Maybe it'll be better or worse. I don't know. But I'd rather you just have the education, and the conversation for free, and not say, I'm not going to call because I don't want to pay a consultation fee.
Yeah, and I highly encourage Elevate Nation to take Brian up on that offer. It's a free initial consultation, free diagnostic. So go check him out and stay in contact with Brian, because he's putting out a lot of great content. He's sharing that information with many people for free. I mean, this is something that he's doing to contribute. He's elevating many others, and so I want to remind Elevate Nation that there's a lot here. You've got to go back, and like, the key is repetition, right? You got to play this show again, take notes, because it is all about applying, immediately, to be able to really elevate your own results. And so you've also got to take massive action. It's not just consuming, it's not just learning. It is about anchoring that into your nervous system. And so, really, that's our show for today. And Brian, I want to thank you again for being here, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Ty.
Absolutely, my friend. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Elevate. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, take this opportunity to elevate your results by taking immediate action on what you learned. For more, visit tylerchesser.com.